Thanks for tuning in to Wine Blast. Sign up to Wine Blast Plus for first-class subscriber-only content to access our full archive, support the show and get every episode before it goes on free release. You'll also get subscriber-only discounts with the likes of Coravin, Jancis Robinson Glassware and Academy du Vin Library. Just visit wineblast.co.uk or click the link in the show notes. Hello and welcome to Wine Blast. It's a joy to have you with us. Thanks for tuning in. And this one's an intriguing one because we're exploring how the power of yeasts is being harnessed in increasingly creative and sometimes surprising ways to serve the cause of wine.
Yes, we're brandishing our microscopes and donning our white coats, which we always keep handy.
Do we?
Sort of. No. Well,
do you?
Whatever.
So I've got a white
coat. The idea being that we can get to grips with this busy and perhaps sometimes misunderstood microscopic world and how it's helping wine cope with everything from climate change to new consumption trends. Here's a taster of what's coming up.
These are the tricks you've got to start using, but we need more and more and more of these, tools because the traditional, applications that we're putting out there are not going to cut it for the future.
So a lot of microbial solutions are very efficient. Yeast can also help to reduce the chemicals. So there are really many different applications of this yeast.
It was incredible. We were shocked, actually. It's a game changer. Yeah, I think it's exciting and it's really positive.
So respectively, that's winemaking consultant Christopher Chen, Professor Hervé Alexandre and shocked Marks & Spencer winemaker Belinda Kleinig, all talking about the power of yeasts.
Yeah, we're going to be hearing more from them all in due course. But first, let's get into why we're looking into this, why now, and how it's all going to work. So I think deep down, we all want to believe that wine is totally natural and artisanal and sort of bucolic. We come at it with rose-tinted specks. In short, it's a form of cognitive bias. At least that's my excuse.
You have excuses for many things, don't you? But the reality, of course, is that in order to make wine, intervention is essential, even if it's just a human putting crushed grapes into a vessel where it hopefully won't turn into vinegar. That's intervention. And intervention actually happens all the way through the wine process, from cultivating the grapes and ensuring a healthy harvest to then making and packaging and shipping the wine.
Yeah, so given that intervention is essential for wine, the vital question then becomes how much and what kind of intervention? This is a topical debate, of course, because at one end of the scale, you have the more extreme end of the natural wine spectrum, where producers go for zero additives and ultra minimal intervention, which stands in stark contrast to a high volume conventional branded wine, for example, with significant intervention.
Now, this debate can get pretty heated and shouty, but the reality is that the vast majority of wine sits somewhere in the middle of these two extremes, and drilling down into the detail of interventions can reveal all kinds of fascinating things, particularly when it comes not to chemical or physical treatments, but microbial solutions.
Now, I don't know about you, but we find the microbial world intriguing. It's a realm that has been invisible and unexplored for most of human history. But now we're just starting to realise how massive its impact can be on us as humans and in the natural world around us, including wine.
So we all know how wine wouldn't exist without yeast. They convert the sugar in grape juice into alcohol, at the same time generating the flavours and aromas that make wine wine. So far, so good. But these days, the story doesn't end there. What we want to get into in this episode is how yeasts are now being put to work in all kinds of ingenious ways, from the vineyard to global shipping logistics, to reduce the need for chemical intervention, help with sustainability, combat the effects of climate change, and adapt to changing consumer trends.
To do this, we've teamed up with L'Allemand, or L'Allemand, who are sponsoring this programme and giving us privileged access to their latest research and their contacts in the field, as it were. So we can get a sense of how they're working with producers to confront the many challenges facing wine these days and what exactly is happening on the front line of microbial innovation.
So just a quick word on Lallemande. They're a family-owned company based in Canada which specialises in microorganisms in the agri-food world. They actually started out serving the baking industry and still do that to this day. But with a global team of over 400 R&D scientists, they now work across a number of fields, including brewing, biofuels, animal nutrition, probiotics and plant care, and of course, wine production.
Yeah, on the wine front, they make yeasts, bacteria and nutrients, all natural, no GMO stuff. Many of these focus on the basic fundamentals of winemaking, the primary alcoholic fermentation or the softening malolactic fermentation and the bits and bobs around that. But what piqued our interest was when we found out about the other more adventurous purposes they've been putting their microbes to as biostimulants for bioprotection and bioacidification, even to help ensure your wine stays fresh while it's crossing continents.
So we wanted to find out more. First stop, Australia, and respected consultant Christopher Chen. Chris was born and bred in Tasmania, now based in Adelaide. His work has taken him all over the world, including Switzerland, where his family has roots, France and beyond. He's worked in everything from natural wine to biodynamic and organic projects, right through to large-scale conventional operations. He says he's pinched the best bits from all of them.
Chris has impressive qualifications and experience across a number of roles, but we wanted to talk to him specifically about viticulture. In particular, and touching on a theme from a recent episode, about the challenges around drought and water availability for vines in an era of climate change. He says water security is absolutely vital. So I asked him what options he has to cope with water stress in the vineyard.
Well, no bare dirt is a really good one. We're also dramatically trying to increase the organic material in soils across the various properties I work with. In a lot of respects, there's not much you can do when you have high winds and high temperatures. You've just got to keep ploughing the water on until these events stop, and we're seeing those increase rapidly, actually. There are, I think, 3 or 4 instances in the last growing season in the Barossa Valley where we could not physically put enough water on to prevent damage. So I saw these sort of, I guess, weather events happen in Switzerland, in the Rhone Valley, so the source of the Rhone River in the far east of southern Switzerland. They had no irrigation there, and they have the föhn, as they refer to it, the hot wind that comes through the valley there, and we would lose crop because we had no irrigation, and that's also a very arid area. So the long and short of it is, unless we've got an endless supply of water and the most up-to-date irrigation systems, there's very little we can do in the more extreme viticultural scenarios.
So this is a serious situation, an increase in extreme weather events causing damage to the vines and the grapes, from Switzerland to the Barossa Valley. And as Chris says, very little we can do.
Yeah, and he clarified that the damage can be as severe as complete defoliation, so the vine's shedding all its leaves and the fruit raisening on the vine and essentially being totally lost as a crop. In the most extreme cases, perhaps where the plants are already weak or old or diseased or perhaps frail after multiple events of this nature, the vines, can die. So this water issue can be existential.
So the reason Lallemande put us in touch with Chris was that he recently trialled a new product of theirs called Pro Hydro with one of his clients, Greenock Creek in the Barossa Valley. Now this was during the 2026 vintage, which saw the kind of extreme events that Chris was describing.
Now, Pro Hydro is an intriguing thing. It's a natural derivative from wine yeast that contains a high level of proline, an amino acid that plants naturally produce when they're stressed by heat or drought. Proline is kind of like a vine's natural stress shield, helping maintain cell hydration, protecting leaves from heat damage, and keeping photosynthesis running even when water is limited. By spraying vines with Pro Hydro, the idea is you essentially boost their natural stress coping capacity.
Now, early trials were promising, showing better leaf hydration, healthier vine canopies, and less oxidative stress. Basically, the vines behaved as if they had more water, even though they didn't. Researchers calculated that Pro Hydro could save between 170 and 340 cubic metres of water per hectare per year. And vines could give the same yield with 20 to 25% less water, a potentially huge win for sustainability.
But trials are one thing. How will it stack up in Chris's real-life application?
Yeah, so this is my first year of using it properly, and I was extremely interested to see, because I've explored the full gambit of the biodynamic preparations and the teas that you can prepare with hopefully having the same aim. So basically all about de-stressing the vines and actually giving it some strength. So we applied it only twice this year, and what we saw is that it tends to fortify the natural sort of, I guess, bloom on the berries and on the waxy surface of the leaf. We also noticed that the canopies really took off as well, so there was a better uptake of water. So we're thinking that it actually has a more efficient uptake of water. We had far bigger canopies than our neighbours. We also have canopies now that are showing much more life post-harvest, and the vine seems to be still transpiring quite a lot. And when you look at it, I guess they're very concentrated solutions of amino acids, so that makes a lot of sense. From the science, I guess. It's very, I can't put any numerical sort of figure on what we've seen, but we've definitely seen healthier canopies, which have enabled us to ripen things earlier, because we believe there's more efficiency in terms of the photosynthate going into the ripening process. And additionally, we've been able to maintain denser canopies in a pretty fierce environment. I mean, it was the hottest year in 23 years in the Barossa Valley, so it's a pretty big stat. For example, the Cabernet, which we harvested 3 weeks ago, still looks like it has, there is not a single yellow leaf on it yet. So that was a big surprise to me.
So you've tried this for the first time, and I mean, it sounds like the results have been fairly dramatic. I mean, very noticeable at least. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. It's hard. I like to have things in numbers, but it's very hard to put a numerical sort of figure on the success of it. But put it this way, we've just come from, I spent almost the last week down in Tasmania. It's probably one of the latest seasons on record down there. So haven't even harvested anything yet for still wine. We had a frost of minus 2.1 on the early hours of Sunday morning. We will definitely be using ProHydro as a way of fortifying the vineyard for events like this later on in the season. So hydric stress there is not such a big deal, but there are much other, just as damaging climatic events that occur down there. So it's been a big discussion with the guys at L'Alamont here about that as well. So I am 80% of the way convinced that this is a must-do. So based on one season, so yeah.
So it worked in Barossa, things ripened well and the vines stayed healthy despite the intense heat, and he's now looking to use it in Tasmania. And it could well become a must-do, as he says. Interesting also his perspective, having used the teas, the kind of homeopathic dynamized herbal solutions that are used in biodynamic viticulture.
Yeah. He said he thought that while the biodynamic teas did help, ProHydro had a more definitive effect, was also easier to apply. Plus, he quite rightly said that biodynamics isn't for everyone. You have to really buy into the whole sort of philosophy of the farming system if that's what you're going to do, whereas something like ProHydro could work anywhere.
I had some conversations with some guys in Priorat just before Christmas saying that you should really check this out because you guys have got very old vines, you've got no water. These are the tricks you've got to start using. So that's a discussion I'm sort of spruiking around. I mean, I've got no loyalty to L'Alamont or anything like that. It's just something that I saw work in a pretty tough season. But we need more and more and more of these, I guess, tools to be able to use, because the traditional, I guess, applications that we're putting out there are not going to cut it for the future. And that is something that I'm pretty concerned about, especially when I'm talking to owners and boards of businesses where I'm saying that this is the risk that you have, and if you don't address it now and have water security, then the writing's on the wall.
And from what you've seen, this is potentially something that works, something you can use pretty much anywhere in the world, and it could be one of the solutions moving forward to the challenges of viticulture. I
think it's a nice tool to have in the workshop, that's for sure. So you've got to try it at least and incorporate it amongst other things into your vine health program for sure.
What about the downsides to using a product like ProHydro? Cost, any other things you'd flag up?
Oh yeah, it's. I mean, you compare it to your sulfur copper regimes; it's far more expensive. But when you spread that across the cost of production per hectare, it's not prohibitive. We're using a combination of, in some of the places I work, a combination of contractors and own labour. Even I'm driving the spray unit sometimes, and I had no qualms mixing it up. But I mean, some of the contractors referred to it as snake oil, so you've got to get people over the line about new products. But that's not a big deal.
I mean, as a viticulturist and winemaker, how important are tools like this to you in the modern wine world?
End of the day, I guess the health of the business is the bottom line, and all these tools and being across all the technology out there, whether it's AI or whether it's a new product like ProHydro, you have to have everything in your repertoire, and you've got to be across it. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you're trying to keep up with the competition or create a saleable product at the end of the vintage. And sometimes they can be the be all and end all of achieving that. So to answer your question, you've got to have everything on your fingertips and be across how to use it. Otherwise, I just see it getting tougher and tougher and tougher.
Now, when you look ahead, Chris, how do you see wine producers adapting and overcoming the challenges of the future?
It's a really tough question and a good question. I think water management is key. Making sure the vineyards are actually planted in the best place possible for vineyards for that particular style of wine. I think being across all the technologies and available tools, as I've referred to before, a lot of good luck. Having great people around you.
Chris, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Peter. Fantastic chat. Really appreciate it.
So it sounds like a battle being fought on many fronts, taking advantage of as many tools as possible, including things like ProHydro.
Yeah, I mean, being able to grow wine with less water by using a natural yeast-based product, it's pretty groundbreaking, isn't it? As we discussed on our Drop Stop episode, lack of water is going to be a huge issue for wine producers moving forward, and this can work pretty much anywhere.
Now, there are other products for the vineyard too, like a fungal derivative called botrytis that can actually prevent rot, such as botrytis, which is one of the key challenges in wine growing, increasingly so with climate change. Apparently, crop losses in viticulture and fruit growing due to botrytis and related diseases are estimated to cost around $2 billion every year. And sometimes producers spray lots of chemicals trying to protect against that. But this botrytis, which is a chitosan polymer made from Aspergillus niger, can be used in organic vineyards like ProHydro can. It leaves no residues and can have pretty dramatic effects.
So microbes pulling their way in the vineyard. Intriguing. Let's have a pause before we come back to explore the winery and beyond. To recap so far, wine producers face many challenges in their aim to make delicious wine and pursue a sustainable business. And now they're looking to enlist the help of microbes in their noble quest. We've seen how microorganisms are being put to work in the vineyard, but what about the winery?
Okay, so just to recap on the basics of yeast, they convert sugar into alcohol while creating aromas and flavour and texture. In fact, some of the hallmark features of our beloved wines, all grape varieties, are actually created by the yeasts, not the grapes. That is something to bear in mind.
So you could think of grape juice as Clark Kent and the wine as Superman, with the yeast providing his awesome superpowers. Does that work? Does that work?
I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. Can't quite get my head around it, but I'm sure it does.
At least I didn't try that one on our next interviewee, Professor Hervé Alexandre, Director of the Institute of Vine and Wine at the University of Burgundy, which also, incidentally, has its own little experimental vineyard. So he's not only a renowned expert on yeast, but also has hands-on winemaking experience.
Now, Hervé's good because he keeps things simple and understandable. He's distinguished between two key groups of yeasts when it comes to wine. The first are Saccharomyces cerevisiae, the key yeast species for wine and bread and beer, actually. They do the lion's share of the alcoholic fermentation. But then there's also been a lot of interest and research recently into non-sac species, of which there are a lot, including spoilage yeast, but some of which can do useful things, as we will come on to.
Now, one perennial debate when it comes to wine yeast is ambient versus cultured. Some producers don't add anything and allow ambient or indigenous or spontaneous yeast to conduct their fermentation. Others use selected or cultured yeast from a Lallemand packet, for example, which have been produced to give specific outcomes like a healthy fermentation or to bring out certain characteristics in the grapes and wine. Hervé said there was nothing wrong with using ambient yeast, it's just more risky because you have no control over what kind of yeast are in your ferments, including spoilage ones. But selected yeasts don't have to just be about alcoholic fermentation either.
Yeah, we'll come on to that, won't we? Beforehand, though, we should mention sulfites. Sulfur dioxide, or sulfites, are used in winemaking as a sanitizing agent and preservative. Some sulfites are produced naturally by yeasts during fermentation, but more SO2 or sulfites can then be added to grapes or must, which is grape juice or wine, at any stage of the process. And that helps prevent any number of faults from oxidation to bacterial spoilage. Its efficacy is impacted by pH, so the more acidic the wine, the more effective the sulfites.
That said, lately there's been a growing desire among winemakers and retailers to move away from sulfite use, or perhaps heavy sulfite use, maybe influenced by low intervention winemakers, but also because of health concerns and the fact that sulfites can have a dulling effect on wine. But now, bioprotection is entering the fray. I asked Hervé in his busy university office what bioprotection is.
So bioprotection is a technique now that has been used for many years by winemakers. And the idea is to decrease the amount of sulfite that you will use before the alcoholic fermentation. And so the idea is to bring a large amount of yeast, selected yeast, okay? And because you have a large amount of this selected yeast, and because of the properties of this selected yeast, it will prevent the development of indigenous yeast and specifically also some spoilage yeast. So you decrease the sulfite compounds, or you don't use any sulfite compound in this condition, but you protect your must and prevent the development of the indigenous yeast by bringing a large amount of yeast, selected yeast. And among these selected yeasts, so there are some stars like Microbial pulcherrima, for example, but you have also Torula spora delbrueckii, and more recently you have Sciomyces pyralidae.
I'm glad he said those things so I don't have to. But basically, we're talking about non-Saccharomyces yeasts that crowd out other dodgy microbes and mean your must or juice is cleaner, so you don't have to bung in so many sulfites.
Yeah. Hervé said they don't really know how Microbial works yet, but it can outcompete other microbes, and it works as a more natural solution to sulfites, especially given that sulfites will stay in the wine, whereas the yeasts won't. They get removed or filtered out. And, there's a demand for that, isn't there? And it doesn't change the fundamental character of the wine in the process.
He also mentioned Suhomyces. Now, that's intriguing because it specifically targets Brettanomyces, a yeast which can ruin a wine when in excess, by destroying its cell wall. But it leaves Saccharomyces cerevisiae untouched. So it's like a tough guy patrolling the wine, zapping the bad guys, but leaving the good guys. Again, without the need to reach for bucket loads of sulfites.
Chris Chen said he'd use both of these. He said, don't get me started on Brett. But one other thing I wanted to ask Hervé about was bioacidification involving Lactantia thermotolerans. Given global warming can often mean lower natural acidities at harvest time, leading winemakers to add things like tartaric acid. How does bioacidification work?
Bioacidification, it's a way to have more acidity in a wine, but without using chemicals like tartaric acid or malic acid or lactic acid or even fumaric acid. So the idea is to use yeast that are able to produce some of these organic acid during the fermentation, for example. So we already know that for example, for Saccharomyces cerevisiae, some Saccharomyces cerevisiae are able to produce some acidic compounds like a bit of lactic acid or a bit of citric acid and so on. But usually it's not enough to change the acidity of the wine, which is not the case with la chancea thermotolérance, because la chancea thermotolérance is able to produce high amount of lactic acid. And so this is an interesting strategy for winemakers in order to correct the acidity of the must and of the wine using la chancea thermotolérance. So usually what the people do, they will do a tank with la chancea thermotolérance, and then they will blend the wine made with la chancea thermotolérance with other wine without la chancea thermotolérance in order to reach the acidic equilibrium they want. Okay, and so this is what they're doing. And in this condition, you have the more complexity, because it's not only the production of lactic acid. La chancea thermotolérance also produce aromatic compound, which could be interesting and change your sensory profile.
So rather than adding acid, winemakers can use this yeast to produce extra acidity in the form of lactic acid, which is that softer kind of acid, think sort of milky acidity rather than the green apple acidity of malic. That's really interesting.
Yeah. That does sound like you have to apparently be on top of the technical details to make it work. And you wouldn't want too much lactic acid in the mix, hence what you said about a la chancea tank typically being one part of a bigger blend. But it does sound like it can be a useful tool. Apparently there have been 70 winery pilot trials on 16 grape varieties in 5 countries since 2018 with this, and winemakers consistently describe the wines as more aromatic, balanced, smoother, and more vibrant.
So moving on to a more general question, you asked Hervé how useful microbial solutions are in today's wine world.
So a lot of solutions, microbial solutions, are very efficient. So we know this for the alcoholic fermentation. We know this for the malolactic fermentation, because you have selected bacteria, you have selected yeast, you have now yeast for bioprotection, you have yeast for acidification. So you have many different solutions. You can even have some yeasts that are in alginate beads, like Schizosaccharomyces pombe, for example, in order to do the malolactic fermentation partially or totally if you want. So there are really many different applications of this yeast, and which are used by winemakers. So this means that if winemakers are using this solution, this means that they are efficient, otherwise they won't use it.
Can they help reduce the need for chemical or systemic sort of inputs?
Yes, yeast can also, as we said before, help to reduce the chemicals. So it's a kind of bioprotection in wine. But I'm sure that other solution with microbe will arise later for bioprotection in wine, for example, in order to reduce again the sulfite addition during aging.
Now, some people don't like the idea of any intervention in wine, who say, whether it's microbial or chemical, who say wine shouldn't need any products at all. It should be entirely natural. What do you say to them?
I would say that it is their own decision, but of course the risk when you don't do anything, so you take a lot of risk, okay, and you are quite sure that you will have a problem at some point, okay. For these people, when they have a problem, they can't do anything, because the nature is there, the microbes are there, and if you don't prevent their growth, they will grow, and they will spoil the wine. And you can objectively see that, because when you drink natural wine, some are good, but some are spoiled. This is a fact. It's not a story or whatever. It's a fact.
This comes back to Chris's point about the importance of being across the latest techniques, because you never know when you might need them. That's not to say a less interventionist approach isn't possible, but it can be a risk.
And if you are going to intervene, then microbial solutions can work in an efficient way, reducing the need for chemical interventions. The next question for Hervé was, how good are we at mastering the power of microbes in wine these days?
So people are working at the moment to try to discover new functionalities of yeast. So there are still a lot of work of the use of different species of yeast that could help the winemaker to have different wine, to preserve the quality of the wine, to produce more aromatic compounds. And we didn't speak about yeast that could decrease the alcohol content of the wine also, because some yeast also are able to do that. But for the moment, it's not high level of decrease of alcohol content. But I'm sure that in the next few years, we could do wine with a low alcohol content just with yeast, not with technical use of equipment that it's a lot of money, but just using biological microorganisms. I think even lactic acid bacteria and other kind of microbes, we could reduce the alcohol content of the wine more naturally and than the techniques that are used at the moment. Yeah.
How far do you think that could go in terms of alcohol reduction? Obviously, everyone wants a golden silver bullet when it comes to alcohol reduction.
So at the moment, there are some yeasts that could reduce by 1 or 2% the alcohol of wine. But I'm sure that we will find solutions that could allow to do wine with a low level of alcohol. I'm not sure we could reach the 0% of alcohol, but with low alcohols, yes, I'm sure that we could do something in the next few years, yeah.
Mm. So the future uses of yeast are when it comes to wine, are manifold. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hervé, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
Is exciting if Hervé thinks that lower alcohol wine could be produced just through the power of yeast, rather than, for example, the spinning cone or other quite invasive techniques that are used at the moment. That could potentially be a real game changer, couldn't it?
It really could. Yet another role for microbes. He sounds quite bullish about the time frame too. What did he say? The next couple of years sort of thing? It's quite soon. So watch this space. Now, we've looked at the vineyard and winery. The final area we wanted to explore is getting that bottle to a shelf or wine list near you. In other words, shipping.
So we got in touch with Belinda Kleinig, in-house winemaker at UK supermarket Marks and Spencer. Now, M&S is unusual in many ways. Firstly, because it's quite upmarket, known for the quality of its food and drink, and also because it tends to focus on its own labels. In wine, this means sourcing and blending most of its wines, hence needing in-house winemakers who can be involved pretty much all along the wine chain from vineyard to shelf.
Belinda is originally from South Australia and has been a respected member of the M&S team for 16 years. I seized the chance to pop into M&S HQ, all work as ever. Just that's me, all work.
Did you get any Percy Pigs while you were there?
Up in London, I was loitering. I was to be found loitering outside a Tesco's.
Sweet tile.
As the delicious smells sort of wafted out. But we then retreated into a nearby wine room, away from the hustle and bustle. I asked Belinda how she sees the current state of the market and the biggest challenges that major retailers like M&S are facing.
I think it's challenging at the moment in several different ways. I think for us as a big retailer, maintaining consistency and protecting we have a strong brand, M&S, protecting that brand is critical for us. And so maintaining consistency for our customers. So if there's wines that they like, they want to continue buying them. We want repeat purchases. We want to build trust with our customers. Achieving that consistency, I think, is getting harder and harder with climate change, achieving sustainability, cost pressures, keeping quality with cost pressures involved. So I think for us, probably our main one is, and that's the point of having winemakers at M&S, we help to achieve that consistency.
So the way they make their wines with in-house winemakers helps them achieve consistency in their wines. But it sounds like it's hard to do that, and increasingly hard, what with climate change and customers expecting sustainable sourcing and production with the corresponding pressures on cost.
Yeah, and M&S have been a bit of a pioneer in championing sustainability among big UK retailers. Its Plan A has been going nearly 20 years now, which is quite a thought. Reducing carbon footprints with its suppliers has been a key part of that initiative, and given that shipping heavy bottles around the world is a major part of wine's carbon footprint, they've been looking at doing things like bulk shipping, especially in their cheaper lines. So apparently something like 20% of their range under £10 is now shipped in bulk and then bottled in market.
Now, Belinda explained that bulk shipping has improved a lot in the last 10 to 15 years. They use big flexi bags, 24 to 26,000 litres, like a massive bag-in-box, if you like, party size. Because of the moderating effects of the size, the wines are less likely to suffer from heat damage en route compared to a bottle, for example, which can heat up very quickly. But if there is jeopardy, it comes from the risk of oxidation when filling the bag and then emptying it.
And of course, if the wine were to oxidise, that would be catastrophic. The entire batch would be lost. In this case, 24,000 litres.
That's a lot of wine.
There's no coming back from that. One solution, the normal one, is to use lots of sulfites, which, remember, act as an all-purpose preservative. But another one, courtesy of Lallemand, involves using specialist inactivated yeast cells, essentially dead yeast, which retain their oxygen scavenging properties. Something called Pure Lees Longevity, and M&S was some of the first to use it.
We started a project with Lallemand several years ago where we trialled using a product called Pure Lees Longevity, PLL, into bulk shipped tanks from New Zealand, actually, Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. It's mimicking having a wine on lees in tank. So, for instance, the Loire Valley has always done this, and countries around the world always do this now. It is known as the best way to store your wine for a long time is on the lees.
And the lees is the
It's
dead...
the yeast lees left over from fermentation. Exactly. Yes. So no longer fermenting, no longer doing anything. However, very active in scavenging oxygen and giving texture, providing protection. So we trialled these Sauvignon Blanc. We had a control tank, so we shipped 2 tanks basically, a control one with nothing added to it, normal sulfur levels, normal everything. And then the second tank, we added the Pure Lees Longevity first, then the wine into the flexi bag, and the same sulfur treatment as the control. So the only difference was the fact that the second one contained some Pure Lees Longevity. And it's, we started out, we wanted to do this trial because we were worried about sulfites levels in wines creeping up for bulk shipments, because everyone was very nervous about shipping in wine in bulk and wanted to protect it. So everyone was adding a lot of sulfur, and we were aware of it, and we were aware of the fact that once it got to this end in the UK or France, we were all adding more sulfur to get the free sulfur back up to kind of 30, 35 parts per million. So there was a lot of sulfur being thrown at these bulk tanks, and that worried us.
And so, firstly, can you just give us a very quick rundown on what sulfur does, why you add it, and then secondly, why that worries?
So sulfur is the main preservative in wine. We need it. We've dabbled with sulfite-free wines, and it's not reliable at all. There's a lot of bottle variation. So it's universally understood that we need to preserve wine with, and the best way is sulfur dioxide. But so shipping in bulk, when we're adding more and more, I think we've had a few customer complaints, we get them occasionally, of people with sulfite allergies. So it is an allergen, and it's a serious one if you're allergic. And if you're allergic, you will avoid wine, you will avoid dried fruit, all sorts of food products that contain sulfites. But so we were just aware of the fact that, and I think we had a couple of people in the team who were more sensitive to sulfites and were, getting red face or a runny nose, and I don't know whether it was the sulfites or not, but it was in top of our mind that there was potentially an allergen type issue with having too much. And why would we have too much if we could keep it lower?
And just to finish off on this, could there also be a quality issue of sulfur dioxide sort of subduing a wine?
Absolutely, yes. So I think we've all seen that in wines that have just been bottled. There's a dulling of flavours until the sulphur has dissipated or integrated into the wine better.
So, just back to the results of using this PLL, Pure Lees Longevity, with the sulfur dioxide in these 2 shipments from the other side of the world, New Zealand to
New Zealand.
France. You noticed a big difference.
It was incredible, Peter. So we did a tasting here a few months after. So the wine was bottled in France with Paul Sapin, and we bottled it in both 75cl bottles and also a 1.5 litre pouch. So we have a big customer base buying wine in pouch, and the Sauvignon Blanc is one of the most popular. So we did it in 2 formats just out of interest to see. And we were shocked, actually. We'd done it to see if we could avoid having to add more sulfites when they arrived here, and we didn't. We didn't have to add any sulfites because the wine hadn't basically not changed from where it left to arriving in France. So that was perfect. That was what we wanted. But what we didn't expect was the difference in freshness, in flavour, in longevity. So we noticed the longevity particularly in the pouch because, as you all know, it has a shelf life. It doesn't, unlike bottles. Well, the bottle also has a shelf life, but the pouch is more pronounced, you notice. So we kept tasting at 3, 6, 9, 12 months, and we doubled the shelf life on those pouches by shipping it with PLL. So that was an unexpected benefit that we didn't foresee.
So it really was a bit of a game changer.
It's a game changer, yeah. And for the wine in bottle as well, the flavour profile is just fresher, and it almost brought out more flavours. More expressive, more just fresher, greener flavours. But that's what you want in Sauvignon Blanc.
So a potentially game-changing technology from dead yeast.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it really did make quite a dramatic difference.
Yeah.
And if it then also extends shelf life in alternative packaging, which may help the move away from heavy glass bottles, that's potentially really positive too. And again, a natural non-chemical solution.
Now, it's interesting because M&S aren't currently using PLL because they had to change supplier in New Zealand and also move their bottling to the UK. Implementing this kind of innovation isn't easy, Belinda said, because you need a supplier who's not afraid to take risks and be interested to learn. And then most bottlers are terrified of having anything called yeast anywhere near a bulk shipment because of the risks of re-fermentation. So I asked Belinda what the downsides are.
I guess the downside is having partners that are willing to try new things, and it is a risk. It's always a risk when you're trying something new. We had a challenge when we moved our bottling from our partner in France. We moved it to the UK, and the contract bottlers in the UK aren't as equipped with filtering equipment, so there was no cross-flow filter or tangential filter. So that was a challenge for us. And equally at the other end, having someone that's willing to load their tank with lees in it, because it's not the norm. So I wish it could become the norm.
I was going to say, what do you think, objectively speaking, the potential impact of something like this could be?
Yeah, well, to be honest, as the trial was happening, when we looked at the wines on the bench, I was very excited, and I immediately thought. This is probably the way forward for bulk shipping wine across the world, because why would you not? Why would you not do that? So I guess it is still. I thought all the bottlers would be, wow, okay, we can really make a go of almost selling bulk wine as a feature. Like you've got free shipping on lees for 8 weeks. I don't know. It could have been. Someone could have grabbed it. Someone might still grab it. I hope someone will grab it and run with it.
So it could be the future, or part of the future.
I think so. I think it's I think so. I think it's exciting. I think it's a piece of control that hasn't been there in the past, and it's really positive.
It's funny in wine, isn't it? Wine's quite a traditional product.
Yeah.
And do you think sometimes there's a bit of a fear of innovation, or is it just we take longer to get there?
I think there's some conservative thought around it. Because we're dealing with such big volumes, it's a big risk, and not that many people are willing to take the risk. Because if something does go wrong, someone at the end of the day has to be the fall guy. Yeah.
I mean, do you think we might get there? It's just a process.
I think if more people talk about it, if more customers go to them and say, we'd like to ship our wine protectively on lees, then it would happen very quickly, I think.
Because the upshot is, for not that much more effort, you get a fresher, more consistent product. You can use less sulfur dioxide, less risk involved.
Yeah. I guess the only other challenge is there is a cost to it. It's not a massive cost, but it is a cost.
Per litre would it add?
Do you know what? I'm not even sure. It was in the region of a couple of cents per litre, not
so that
huge.
Can make a difference at certain price
points?
points?
It can make a difference, yeah. Yeah.
Do you think it's a worthwhile investment, though?
Absolutely, yeah.
You do get a sense of how difficult it can be to innovate in wine. But when you asked her how important tools like this are for her, she said, and I quote, really important and becoming increasingly important, especially in this challenging environment she talked about at the start.
Yeah, we did then end up discussing changes in wine consumption, the move to moderation and lower alcohol wines. And she said, we need all the tools we can get to keep the younger generation engaged and enthused. So what about the future of wine in an era of rapid change?
I think it's going to have to change. I think making sure that consumers have a range that they want and not, I think this industry has always been led by tradition, which is lovely, but it's not necessarily going to save the people that are drinking less or not youngsters that aren't coming into drinking at all. I know I have a couple of sons. I've got 3 sons. One of them's heavily into drinking. So the other 2, my body is my temple. They know that it's bad. To have some options to bring that customer in a gentle way, or in a way that we're all in wine because it's fantastic, isn't it? It's an artisanal product. It's no 2 wines are the same. We're talking about consistency, but it's true that no 2 wines are the same, and that's the joy. That's why we all got into it, and so somehow we need to keep that enthusiasm around for future customers, future generations.
Belinda, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Peter.
And I think this is kind of what Chris and Hervé touched on too. Wine has to face up to many challenges right now, from climate change to the importance of sustainability to fast evolving consumer trends, and it needs all the help it can get to do that.
The perfect note to end on. So by way of closing summary, wine is benefiting from the hitherto hidden power of microbes in ways that go well beyond simple fermentation. Microbial solutions are helping vines resist drought and rot, enabling winemakers to reduce sulfite use and naturally acidify, and preserving freshness during bulk shipping in the bid to reduce wine's carbon footprint. Whisper it, but we may even be close to developing yeast that can lower alcohol levels significantly. All of which are helping wine face up to challenging times and changing tastes.
Thanks to our interviewees Christopher Chen, Professor Hervé Alexandre and Belinda Kleinig. And of course, thanks to Lallemand for sponsoring this episode. If you have any questions or feedback, do send us a message via SpeakPipe or find us on social media. Links are in our show notes. Meantime, thanks for listening, and until next time, cheers.